planning is the nightmare on the safe street for each and every RTE, not to mention the teams. Been there, done that. So today I would like to walk you through the important steps to make it right, so that we can decrease the amount of stress for you. Let's go! Hi, I'm Maria, and this is the Agile State of Mind. Welcome! What is PI planning? PI planning, or Program Increment Planning in Safe Scaled Agile Framework, is a way for multiple teams to align on a plan for the quarter. In theory, the teams should align on a common goal, but we know that in practice it all boils down to align on the next features to implement. Somebody said feature factory? Usually it's done on a quarterly cadence, so we could easily call it quarterly planning, but why simplify if we can complicate things, right? But let's stop for a moment and see what we're gonna do here. I've done a lot of PI plannings in my life, and I thought, why not help people who just happen to be in a company that decided to go all the way safe and do the planning their way. So this way I can help you based on my experience. I hope the rolling of my eyes won't deter you from following the advice. Let's do it a little bit lightly, without too much indoctrination from the safe documents, but just based on what it really takes in practice. I will do a couple of videos. The today one will be about everything that takes us all the way up until we can start planning. Because when we finish one planning, we actually start preparing for the next one. It's not an easy task. So there are a lot of things, preconditions, let's call them, that can help you succeed with the plan. We will go over the safe roles and the names to locate you within the framework. We will go through an alignment on priorities, the team assessment and team assignment. You need to know which priority will be done by which team. Then we'll go by the designs, the UX and architecture designs, because that's what needs to be somehow ready before the teams are ready to plan. And in the next video, I will share how to do the planning. So let's get the abbreviations straight. Safe and many corporations have something in common. They love the abbreviations that only they understand. So PI planning, as we said, is program increment planning. Basically, program increment as like iteration, which basically means that it's about quarterly planning. Then we have big teams, team of teams, right? They are called ARTs, Agile Release Trains. Those are basically the team of teams, groups of teams that work on something that should be something like a value stream, a product, let's call it, something that they have in common, and they usually have a lot of dependencies among each other. That's why they collaborate together on creating the plan and then working through the PI. Then we have the different roles, and most of them are really the same. We have the business owner, which can be anyone in the company, product group manager, anybody who has something to say about the vision. It can be also a UX manager. And then we have a lot of VPs and engineering leaders who also take part in that. Usually, at some point, people realize that if you have this team of teams and you want to have some business owner, some owner of this part to be able to align the people within this group, then you create like an art owner that usually is a senior technical manager, but also senior product manager, because we need those two people to align. Then you have also the RTE, which is like a Scrum Master of Scrum Masters, major coordinator of that team of teams, the art, and also the person responsible to prepare this PI planning and work on the overall structure and process. Then you have the PM, the Scrum Master, everybody in the SAFE framework. They are called the SAFE Scrum Master, just SAFE PM. I think those are the most important roles to understand, and don't be scared of them. They are just people that are renamed from other roles that you already have in the company. Let's take a few steps back and think about what problems does the PI planning solve? What it actually means, a program increment planning. So the increment, usually it's a quarter. which means we are planning for next 6 sprints. 6 sprints of 2 weeks, which basically makes up a quarter, 3 months. What problems does it solve? Well, it's meant for those big organizations that have multiple teams, and it's really hard to align all of them, especially if you not really align on goals, but you just have a list of priorities, a list of features that everybody needs to do, which is the usual, right? This planning, in theory, should help to align the teams, to mitigate the dependencies, to identify the dependencies and make sure that the team, we usually have component teams in this kind of organizations that use SAFe. Component teams meaning you need this team because they own the asset to do this thing because nobody else can do it, or want to do it, or is allowed even to do it. So we just try to know that if this team that everybody, let's say identity team that works on identifying the user, needs to work probably in the first sprint to unblock all the other teams. So that, in theory, should be what PI planning helps you with. Alignment, identifying the dependencies, and also making sure that any requests that are coming from outside of the team can be allocated. And of course, it goes without saying, but the managers like to control what the teams are doing. What's a better way to control the teams than to have a plan for each sprint of the quarter and then hold the teams accountable for any delays to that plan? PI planning was thought to help with all of that. The idea comes from the big room planning, where we put all the teams in one room for 2 days and let them align and define the plans for the quarter. Currently, I don't know how many teams actually can afford to meet in person, given that we are in this all-remote world. You can use it both for in-person planning, but also for the remote planning done by distributed teams. And now you would ask me, is planning a work for a quarter ahead any agile? And this video is not about deliberating how agile the scaled agile framework is. It's about how to do the PI planning when the company went all SAFe and you are suddenly named an RTE, Release Train engineer, the person that needs to create and plan for the planning. So let's do it. The timeline. There's a very important thing on your hands, is to show the teams some kind of a timeline when everything needs to be done. Imagine you are terrified by the idea of creating this planning. How terrified must the team be that they will need to plan the things? It really helps mitigating this fear by showing the timeline, explaining everything step by step, what's expected at each phase of this process. So we can create this cadence. Usually we are thinking about it in this two-way. It's like dual track. On one hand, we are preparing for the readiness for the next PI, for the next quarter. And on the other hand, at the same time, we are executing the current quarter, obviously. So it's really good for the teams to know what's expected at each stage and on both of those tracks. We have the phase where we agree on the priorities. We have the phase where we assign and talk with the teams who will take what. We have the phase of the design, and then we have the phase of the planning. So it really helps to align this plan with the sprints. You know, everybody's used to already, I hope, in your organization to working in sprints. In SAFe, they also work in sprints. So if you have PI planning number 1, you have 1.1, first sprint of the first planning. If you are at planning number 9, on the second sprint, it's 9.2. Once you get this nomenclature, the naming and going, everybody will get used to it, and it will be really easy to understand what you're talking about, and everybody will be able to place themselves where we are and what is expected. At first, everything will be a chaos. I usually tell it to the teams openly. So when we are going into, we usually do a week of planning. And when we kick it off, I usually tell them, guys, it will be a chaos. Anything better than a chaos is already a win. So let's look at it this way. We are facing something totally new that we don't know what to do. But we will be there to help you. We also don't know all the answers. Let's just embrace the chaos and start. And after a few PI plannings, you will get to understand what works, what doesn't. People will know what to expect, and you will keep iterating. No planning ever was the same for us, and I done quite a lot of them. We always iterate, we listen to the feedback, we do retrospectives afterwards, and we make sure that whatever works can work even better next time. So, first things first, prerequisites for the PI planning. 1. Make the priorities clear. The perfect world for me would be that the senior management team comes with some kind of OKRs, or at least the objectives. So we know what's the most important for the whole company, not just for my team. And this way we understand where we want to go, and then everything suddenly is easier to prioritize. But unfortunately, that's not always the case. It's already good if we have list of priorities, which are usually features to implement, in some kind of an order. You need to make sure that the PMs, which usually in SAFe are different people than the POs that work with the teams. Unfortunately, that's the truth. Any kind of business owners and higher leadership, they have a say in the priority list. What we usually do is we use product boards for that. You can use also Jira and the level of initiatives. If you have Jira plans, this is like a plugin. Be whatever it is, it's good to have that list, have it clear, and have everyone agree, disagree, and commit, but have it. That's the important thing, because the teams will know how they need to plan their work and plan their capacity and unblock each other and so on. This will be really helpful. Not only the teams, it's also for the architects and for the UXers in our waterfallish structure who need to start preparing the designs. The first 2 sprints, when we start the execution of the current PI, should be dedicated to creating that list. Of course, at the beginning, you will do it later, but at some point, you will arrive at this conclusion that the sooner you have it, the better off you are. 2, make sure the architects, the UXers are aware of that priority list and they actually had some say in creating that. And they start preparing the designs and the solution designs, whatever the architects do. Usually we are talking here about some big organizations, corporations. They have architects that are not with the teams. Sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't. They need to have this bird's eye view on the solution application architecture. And you also have the UXers, which is usual. Like if we go to a sprint planning, we usually have the UXers working up front, so the teams know what's the idea of the app. All those designs need to be prepared in this dual track in the readiness part. Usually in the first 2 sprints, we align the priorities, then we have 2 more sprints to work on the designs until the planning, basically. And the 3rd step would be, it is a step in parallel. The teams need to identify which priorities they will be working on. Because, as I said, component teams, even if they are cross-functional teams, we need to know who is working on what. Usually it would be that the teams assign themselves to those priorities, and this way they know what they will be working on. And the 4th step after this would be to go to the PI planning session. So once we have the priorities defined, we have the designs, the teams know which priorities they will work on, only then we can go ahead and start doing the planning itself. A lot of those things can be really done offline, and the planning itself doesn't need to be this huge thing that everybody is scared of, because if you really have this process in place, the planning itself gets a lot more easy. I hope this gave you a little bit of overall view what needs to be done before we are ready to plan the readiness path to the PI planning, which in the other companies where you don't do SAFe, you also do some quarterly planning. You also set some objectives for the quarter. So you also could use some kind of a timeline for it. And this is like one that shows some maturity of the teams and of the process itself. So don't worry if you don't have it. You will get there with the work and the experience that you get. No worries about it. And stay tuned for the next video about the PI planning itself, and I will show you how not to get crazy or burned out after the first one. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.